Welcome everybody. Today it's Friday. Last you saw me was at the start of the week, right before the patch landed on Tuesday, when I was talking an awful lot about PvP based stuff, because indeed on Tuesday that was the introduction of Season 5 and a huge amount of different things that the devs were changing and shaking up for Guild Wars 2's PvP going forward. There was a huge amount to get through, and well, those changes have gone in. At the same time, so has Wintersday, so's a bunch of new decorations, so's a bunch of new cats, and something pretty cool happened in the community too, relating to some content that was totally missed, and some pretty badass lore stuff too, in my opinion, related to the Rising Flames patch. Remember, we just had a crack in the ice. Something happened to do with Rising Flames during the week, so I got a lot to talk to you all about. I want to fill you guys in, catch you up if maybe you're not playing, and mostly explain what my experiences have been with some of this new stuff, particularly the PvP leaks. So let's jump in. Let's start with PvP, I guess. PvP is the main thing. It's kind of the front runner of this patch. And actually, I've got to say, I have no real metrics for this. I have no real way of knowing. But it kind of feels like this patch, out of the 4 years of Guild Wars 2 existing, this patch is probably the largest chunk of the community I've seen interested in the PvP before. I guess that's a weird way of me trying to say that I think that the PvP population right now is huge. There's a massive amount of posts about it on the forums. There's a massive amount on Reddit. I'm getting a massive amount on my YouTube. People are talking about it everywhere. It's hard to get pugs in certain content, like I was trying to run a Verdant Brink nighttime. Now, I know that's not particularly interesting. Usually, it's easy to get pugs for stuff like that, but no, everybody's PvPing, at least to check out the changes. There are people who have bad experiences, as there always will be with PvP. People get salty about losing matches and want to blame the system, but generally speaking, I think it's been going pretty good. My personal interpretation of it, I don't think holds too much weight just yet, because I haven't finished my placement matches. Since the patch came out, as much as I really do want to PvP, I know I can get quite addicted to this stuff, and I've been a little bit busy in other areas, so I'm only halfway through my placements. For those that don't know, if you're totally out of the loop, this is the first 10 games of the season you play. Your skill rating that you can now see is incredibly volatile, and it will move around a lot based on those first 10 games to see how many wins, how many losses you have. So they're very important 10 games, and they're very stressful and anxiety-inducing games if you want to be competitive. And I've played 5 so far, won 3, lost 2, so not particularly stunning results as it is, but some people have got in there and played tons. I think the leaderboard already is showing something like 50 or 60 wins for people as I record this now, and the season's only been out for a few days, and so I'm really curious what that will continue to look like. And there's even names on there too, which I think are not associated with current top teams before this system came in, which is really good, by the way. What that means is that this is an excellent way for people to recruit into their statics, and hopefully we'll see more competitive team-based stuff going forwards, because as you know, this is solo and duo queue only. My experiences, I've not been duo queuing, I've only been in there solo, and I don't even know what build I want to play right now, so my 5 games in my placement matches have been on an incredibly cheesy Burn Ellie. It's very, very, very interesting. So I do recommend you guys get in there. The loot does seem pretty cool. They have got a few problems, or had a few problems, with the new vendors. The Ascended Ring you get for some ridiculously weird, and I don't know reason, it comes pre-infused, and presumably you can still attune. The Ascended Armor you can get from PvP didn't have infusion slots on it for a while, which also was kind of weird and stupid, but I think they fixed now. And there were a few little things, but the subsequent patches have already ironed that stuff out. So yeah, Skyhammer's been pretty good in ranked. So far, I've enjoyed it, but only 5 games, so how much can I say? All I can point out is that there's been a huge community push towards it, and I'd love the devs to come out and say now, yeah, check it out, this is the best that PvP's been, we've got a huge population. It's not all sunshine and roses. I think there are some kind of lame changes. So you guys know that they changed the badges because for some reason they didn't want Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, and so on. They wanted to move away from that completely. Well, the new badges, the, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Platinum, Legendary, they're kind of crappy looking. They're very small and they have a lot of detail on them. And so as a result, they're really not very clear. Like, I believe 2 of them are supposed to look very similar, silver and platinum, maybe, which obviously from the sounds of them have the potential to look very similar. And they don't stand out as much as the old ones. I really liked the old badges that you used to get for seasons 1 to 4, and they've taken those away, so that's a bit of a shame. The other thing as well is when we get a big PvP patch or a season starts, we're supposed to get a balance patch. And so this would be the 5th basically big balance patch that would come in the most recent year that we've had. Obviously, we're moving into 2017 soon. And so this was something that kind of excited me, especially after they talked about that format, because it was timed well, obviously, for the PvP players, but it meant that every area of the game got a bit of a fresh up, even when it was a PvP specific patch, right? So Season 5 comes in, but maybe you don't care about Season 5. Well, guess what? You get a balance patch anyway, and you get to enjoy at least a little something. A balance patch, to me, even if it is primarily nerfs, is still a shake-up, because a nerf is just another kind of buff to everything else. A lot of people don't get that perspective from it, but I really do believe in that. And so, well, I was kind of hoping that with the start of Season 5, we'd see a nice balance patch for the entire game. That was the strength of it, and they kind of didn't do that on this one. There was a balance patch, don't get me wrong, but it was like 90% PvP only changes, and if you're a World vs. World primary or a PvE primary, there's really not very much here for you. Now, what we're seeing here is the other side of the coin. For years, people in Guild Wars have complained. I've openly complained and wanted split balancing. I've wanted them to balance, if it's a PvP motivated change, to make it only for PvP. If it's World vs. World motivated, make it only for World vs. World, and same for PvE. And well, that's what we're seeing on the patch. That's what they've done. It's just the problem now is obviously we have to live with the fact that some of the other game modes aren't going to be changing quite so fast. I really think the fact that so many of these changes in this balance patch are PvP only comes directly from last patch, where I'm fairly confident they made some big nerfs that were aimed only at World versus World, but threw them in everywhere, kind of flippantly, and then there was a lot of complaining about it, no matter how warranted that complaining is. And so I think this patch, they were hyper conservative about it, and well, you know, you're gonna have to live in one world or the other, guys. I'm curious which one you think is the best. Is it best to have the dedicated balance where very little changes in some game modes for long stretches of time, or is it better for them to be kind of rushed with it, but hey, you get changes at least? I think in my mind, I know the answer to that question very, very, very quickly. Okay, so yeah, that's PvP. I promise I will have more to talk to you about with PvP as time goes forward, but for now, let's leave it there and check out the comments to describe how things are going with you. I will say one thing I have very much enjoyed about the community for this, especially when the placement matches were going on and the season started, people were very open about whether they had good experiences or bad experiences. So I'm desperate to not have bad experiences in there, but I already loaded in with a 4v5. I've only played 5 of my placement matches, and one of them had a guy who was AFK at the start of the game. Great, and he complained that he had router issues after joining a little bit later and we'd lost the introduction. But so there are these great threads where you can go in and people will talk about how badly they did or how well they did. But particularly I'm enjoying people who say how badly they did because it makes me feel a little bit better. So if you want to leave that in the comments, please go ahead. That'll brighten my day up. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about Wintersday. Okay, so Wintersday is fairly interesting to me because kind of one of my predictions that I made at Halloween has come true. And so that is that Wintersday really didn't have any content updates, but also that people seem to have expected it and there wasn't a kickback. All right, so let's rewind the clock to Halloween for a second. Halloween, this most recent one, would have been their 4th, and a lot of people were really looking forward to some kind of Halloween update. Last year, we never got one because presumably they were working on Heart of Thorns, and I think there was even a developer comment that stuff like Night Fury, the new reward, was something that only one developer had taken the time to go and put in there. So we didn't get a Halloween update last year, but there was Heart of Thorns, so everyone was okay with it. This year, we wanted a Halloween update. We wanted that story to be pushed. We weren't quite sure if that was on ArenaNet's mind, whether the current events team were going to be able to push a lot out into it or what. And then there was no update, and people were really disappointed. There was some massive thread saying, this is the worst Halloween ever, and so on. And so I said at the time that what ArenaNet might be doing is just trying to push a lot of these festivals into a place where they are really good festivals and they do have a lot of content for new players. So maybe they're happy to just leave them there forevermore. And they're not going to update. Now, they're not going to say never to us because they like to leave things on the table. But I said that they probably wouldn't update Wintersday and that I would be surprised if there was another big community kickback from that, because now people are kind of just expecting that it won't go anywhere. And also, Wintersday is a little bit less special to Guild Wars players than Halloween, because Halloween was kind of the very first that they always supported as heavily as they possibly could. So, Wintersday has come. There was no big updates, and there was no kickback. People seem to have just accepted it. What they did do was update rewards again. Now, Halloween did have an update, obviously. It had the new loot and things that you could get from the currencies. It had the new decorations. Wintersday has had that same treatment. Most importantly, there's a new infusion. So this is a thing you can slot into an infusion slot that will give you a special aura. This one supposedly makes you look like a White Walker from Game of Thrones. Gives you a bit of a glowy effect. I think it's quite reminiscent to one of the Wintersday Aqua Breathers that also gives you a cool little effect. Starts with healing power on it, and then you can stat swap it in the Mystic Forge. Currently, as I make this video, is selling for 800 gold. You get it just very, very rarely from Wintersday presents. I think that kind of stuff is great for festivals because it makes... What's very important for the festivals is that the festival-based currency, in this case snowflakes, and the festival random like little loot box things, in this case the Wintersday gifts, if those are dropping stuff, if those have worth, then all the content they ever built that gives you those things also still has some worth, even if you've played it before, because the rewards feel good. So I really feel like if you can only do a limited amount of work on a festival, the rewards are the place to put that focus, and that's what they've done. And so I do quite enjoy that. The other big thing are the decorations. Oh my god, guys. Now, I know not everybody's into decorations. I think the festival-based decorations the devs have been adding are phenomenal. Now, last year, okay, they did some Wintersday decorations. They did like a tree, they did some snowy things and blah, 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 snow piles. Nothing that interesting, okay, but some flavorful stuff. Now, one of the things they did last year was this giant block of ice, and encased in it is a reindeer. Now, I tried to use that. If you might remember those videos, I tried to use that and spent ungodly amounts of gold, or people in the guild spent ungodly amounts of gold, I wasn't a scribe at this point, to get us these reindeer statues, which were the first ever big decorations to come into the game, big structural based decorations that could come into the game. And we tried to make an arena, a floating arena with 2 floors. You remember, this was before the days of the Super Adventure Box stuff. It was hard, and it was so much money, it took so long to set up. I did a video on it, and in the end people were just like, oh, this looks like a weird floating lump of stuff in the middle of an arena, and it didn't go down too well for people who didn't understand how hard it was to do. Well, at that time, I said, oh my god, can you imagine having unlimited gold, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gold, sinking it all into reindeer ice statues and building an ice palace out of these blocks, because the blocks are so big, they avoid local cap and so on. And so, I liked this idea. The tweet caught on a little bit. Well, this year for Wintersday, they've basically allowed us to do that. The decorations aren't very flavorful, but they are essentially enormous blocks that you can use for structural things. You can sink them into the ground to make snowy floors, or you can just build giant towers and skyscrapers and walls and all kinds of stuff. And so that's what I've been spending most of my in-game time on, either the placement matches or just scribing the hell out of these. I want 100 of each of them. On my next stream, by the way, we're going to do some giant donation drive on snowflakes. Purely snowflakes, to build up as many of these giant snowy blocks as we possibly can, because these things are incredible. They're not very flavorful. It is a bit of a weird set compared to what they've done for a lot of the other sets, but I like what they're going with it, and I'm hoping to take as much advantage as possible. So yeah, those are the new decorations. At the same time with Wintersday, we also had some new cats come into the game. Now, I've got some videos with Boots coming up on those, so I guess I will leave it there. But yes, there were like 5 new cats, I think, and they're all got very complicated recipes and things to go for. And really, the last thing to mention as well are some new current events. But again, as you guys know, I do a dedicated current events series where I run through all of those in a more dedicated manner, and we'll have a look at exactly what's going on there. I still haven't shown you guys the Portal current event stuff, and I suppose the fact that real current events came in might undermine my theory that the current events team disappeared and went to work on Super Adventure Box, damn it, but maybe Maybe we can have it all at once. So that kind of segues me on to the last thing I really want to talk about for this video, and that is Ruriks' engagement ring, I believe is what they're calling it. So this is very, very, very cool. I almost could have talked about this purely on a video on its own, but it's died down a little bit in the community now. So let's just do a brief sum up for you guys. It's to do with the Rising Flames patch. So again, Cracking the Ice was the most recent. This was a hidden thing that no one had found, no one had figured out from way back in Rising Flames. And it's quite eye-opening to me, actually, just how this MMO's been operating. You kind of think, if you remember in a recent video, I talked about one of the developers saying there are some things that they put in the game that is for the individual to find, and there are some things that they put in the game for the community to find. Well, this ring, this ascended ring belonging to Prince Rurik of Ascalon, is definitely one of those community to find based things. And the funny thing is, with an MMO, you expect that stuff to just be uncovered straight away. So like Coda's Blessing, it was obvious there was an achievement in the game, it was obvious that there were the cryptic clues, everybody went and found them, and then it was done. And you expect these things to just be found because it's a huge MMO community, and how could anything possibly be missing for ages? How could anything not have been found that can be found, especially when you think of how many hundreds and thousands of people zerged onto the new map Ember Bay when that patch came out and then left again. But no, this actually did, this little nugget remained sneakily in there, a small Easter egg that was only just picked up. Okay, so the way that this worked was, during the patch, that shaman did a little bit of data mining, and he found a bunch of different ring icons. It looked like somewhere in the game there was a way to build maybe a legendary ring. Oh, maybe this is a ring that we can stat swap. Maybe this is a ring that has a really special aura effect, or a totally new type of effect altogether, or like a full damage or death effect, or something interesting. Man, maybe they sneakily put a legendary ring into the game. I never really believed they'd put a legendary ring in the game, especially not without marketing it, not without letting it be known. I actually think that's an expansion selling thing. Maybe not the best expansion selling thing, but like that's a big feature. But nonetheless, there was definitely a progression to get some kind of ring and build something up. The problem was, though, that despite the fact these icons existed, no one knew how to get them. Or we knew how to get one. So on Rising Flames in Ember Bay, you might remember that as you wander around, there are these Scrit stashes everywhere. And if you complete the Scrit Renown Heart event, you can buy from that vendor for Karma Scrit worker contracts, which if you use in your inventory at these stashes, you can get random items pop out of them. And most of it seemed really inconsequential. It wasn't like something people farmed. But if you got really lucky from these Scrit stashes, you would find, I believe it was called the Strange Rock. And it was this peculiar item that didn't seem to do anything whatsoever, just a strange rock, and it would sit in your inventory. And that item had one of these data mined icons. So at the time of Rising Flames, people knew about this, people got it. It was sitting at around 150 gold or something on the trading post, most likely not because it's ultra rare, but just because nobody knew what it did, so it was worthless, and nobody was using the contract anyway, so it was slowly creeping up in price. And though people thought maybe you could build it into something else, it was just kind of this thing. And so the entire patch came, it went, we all went to a crack in the ice, people went to Bitterfrost Frontier and left it there. Finally, on Reddit, earlier in the week, somebody said, listen, I've got this thing, what, is it going to do anything? Are you actually going to add anything with a recent patch that makes us be able to build it? Because the default assumption is, this is just like the current events portal idea, where clearly it's that the devs haven't implemented everything we need. And a dev response came. And that dev response was that everything that you need to do with that item shipped when the item shipped. And so suddenly the community was tipped off. We realized this wasn't waiting for the developers to throw a patch out and allow us to start building it into something. This was actually already totally relevant in-game. We could do whatever we had to do with it in-game now. It just hadn't been discovered by the community. And so it kicked everyone into a bit of a frenzy. The price of this ring spiked massively on the trading post. It went to over 1,000 gold at one point, with people trying to buy into it with their investments. I don't feel bad for anyone, by the way, who bought it at that price, expecting it to be a legendary ring or something that they were trying to capitalize on. And then they failed. That's what an early investment is to me. But there was this big fever around it. And finally, people realized you could start throwing it into volcanoes. So I haven't done this myself, but apparently if you throw it into the various volcanoes, or you go over to the volcanoes with it in your inventory, you can melt it down. and slowly turn it into this ring, or reveal the ring that is in this strange rock. And that was the idea. It's kind of this thing where you have to wander around the whole map, and when you really look at it like that, just the idea of all you have to do is go to the volcano when you've got the ring in your inventory, it's not even that hard to figure out. It's just that I guess maybe people had already done all their exploration before they start looking at the script stashes or something. Maybe someone did always have that ring, but they just didn't talk about it online. So there was this whole thing with everybody trying to find it, and at the end of the chain, what you end up with is an ascended ring, which is Ruriks' engagement ring. It's nothing like a legendary ring. It doesn't have an infusion. It doesn't have an aura or anything like that. It's just an ascended stat selectable ring, which you'll probably pick berserkers on or whatever. It does have the Heart of Thorn stats on it too, and that's kind of the end. So there is a little bit more to say here. At the time, because this big fever culture had built around it, a lot of people were then suddenly disappointed in ArenaNet and saying, oh, this was way too hyped up. I really don't agree with that. It wasn't too hyped up. It's a hidden little Easter egg side thing that you can do in the map. Just because we got excited about it, because we're enthusiastic about the game, doesn't mean that the devs owe you a legendary ring now, or owe you an infusion now, just because you ended up spending a lot of money on it. I think that's a bit ridiculous. I think on the whole, this was a great thing that they put in the patch, and specifically for me, because of the lore with it. See, if you guys follow my channel closely, you'll know that I was hoping for something Prince Rurik based, maybe some exploration about Sahothin and Ritlock, something maybe even to do with any of the events on Prophecies when we went to the Fire Islands. And in the end, we didn't really get any of that. We were in an entirely new place, and it was further to the south than where most of the relevant stories potentially could have been. And it kind of felt like all that stuff had just been dropped and left to the side for the patch, which was a little bit disappointing. But what this was a genuine reference to my favorite story in all of Ascalon lore, and one of my favorite stories in the entire franchise, right here in very explicit terms with the Rising Flames patch. I think that was such a great idea. So the idea here, guys, is that a previous Prince of Ascalon was owed to be wed to a woman named Althea Baradin. My account name in Guild Wars 2 is Baradin because I like these characters so much. And if you look really closely at it, it seems to be perhaps some kind of attempt to reunify the blood, because Adalbern became the king of Ascalon even though he didn't have the correct blood for it, or he wasn't properly descended as another man, Duke Baradin, was. So they were going to marry their kids off together. But then this woman, Lady Althea, is actually killed and slaughtered by the Char in the searing. She's taken away. There were a couple of quests in early Guild Wars 1 where you would deal with these events. You'd go off and find her ashes. A lot of people would recognize. There's a couple of trinkets in the game already that reference these events. I really, really, really like it. It's a tragic story. And then Rurik doesn't get his wife, even though they were engaged, and then Rurik goes into the Shiver Peaks only to be killed, which is even more tragic, and then he gets friggin' re-summoned and taken where? To the Fire Island chain, where this ring finally laid to rest. Like, this ring has been on a real adventure, guys, and finally you can kind of reclaim it, surrounded by molten rock and lava, and you melt it away and you get that ring for yourself. And I particularly kind of want it for my Viper's stats too. So I really, really like this thing. I thought it was a great inclusion with the patch. I'm curious whether you guys got involved with all of that, but it just goes to show you, all right, like current events at the moment, they're saying that there's another achievement in current events that no one's got right now. And current events seem to be stalled too. That portal storyline, the rifts and stuff, seem to just end. Maybe that goes on further. It just goes to show, guys, this community will not grab everything, and it is worthwhile maybe stepping up to the plate yourself and seeing what you can find, because this ultimately has been available for a few months now, and just nobody had found it. I guess the only other interesting thing about Rurik's Signet Ring is that I believe it does mark the first time you can straight up buy something like this from the trading post that is ascended, and that's quite curious to me. I am, when I go back, we finished Nightfall on Monday on the streams, which means Zero to Hero is kicking back up, and I'm curious whether this will be something worthwhile for new accounts to go for, as, to be honest, once you've got the strange rock in your possession, it's very easy to get a ring out of that. and it's, you know, max stats at that, so who knows. But there you go, guys. That's a bit of a roundup of things that have been going on. Today, I've got loads of different videos and things I want to make, so I'm going to get busting on with that. Thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think about any of this stuff. I hope you feel somewhat more in the loop, and I hope to get as much stuff prepared and thrown out as possible as we roll into Christmas here. So I hope you guys have a wonderful time. Hope you're all prepared, and I will see you very, very shortly. Catch you next time, everybody. Their attempts to have this division system and climbing through the divisions in this year hasn't been quite up to snuff. They don't think that people are being placed properly. So they're going for a lot of changes, but before they can really even start to think about that, there's a more fundamental issue that has to be addressed, and that is the kind of groups that are hitting the queues. So basically, what has been voted on a poll is that for Season 5, we are only able to queue in as a solo queuer or a duo queuer. 1 or 2 players, that is it. You cannot queue in with 3 people, 4 people, or 5 people. The entire season will run like that for ranked, and then they're going to assess what they do in the future. So at first, that might seem really crazy. It might be like, well, why would you do that? You're just cutting away people's ability to be competitive. How has this ended up with an almost